I think if you have a blue slip, then yes. Do we have anyone online? Doesn't look
Is,
like it.
is anyone online?
I don't think we got a request to
No.
participate remotely. Yeah, no, we did not.
If there's no public comment, I would ask for a consideration of the meeting minutes for the February 21st, 2025 meeting.
Move. Make motion to. approve the minute.
Second.
No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Moving on, item 3 is a consideration of the sufficiency of the recall petition submitted by Paul Faust against Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. I think we have folks who would like to represent that. Would you give your name and spell it for the reporter, for the court reporter?
Yes, thank you. My name is Rowan Conybeare, ROWANCONYBEARE. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. They said my name is Rowan Conybeare of Goodman-Acker, appearing on behalf of Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. I will be speaking to both petitions filed by Mr. Faust, so I'd be happy to address them together or separately, whichever you would all prefer.
I'm sorry?
I'll be speaking to both petitions, so I'd be happy to talk about them both or together or separately. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd be happy to talk about the Michigan Campaign Finance one first. So as indicated in our written response filed on Monday, the board should reject this so-called petition for several reasons. First, as a threshold matter, the board cannot review the petition because its form is defective. MCL 168.951A only allows the board to review a petition, and it has mandatory requirements that must be strictly complied with. Relevant for our purposes, petitions must be printed and state factually and clearly each reason for recall. And the Michigan Campaign Finance Act also requires recall petitions to include disclaimers. This petition fails to meet both requirements because there is no disclaimer and the petition is handwritten. Therefore, it does not actually constitute a petition that this board may review. Beyond that, though, the reason for recall is neither factual or clear. MCL 168.951A requires a recall petition to state factually and clearly each reason for the recall. If any reason is not factual or sufficiently clear, then the entire petition must be rejected. This petition, first, is not factual. The statutory provision, MCL 168.951A, requires the named officer to be the one to have taken the alleged action that forms the basis for the recall petition. As such, this board has rejected recall petitions because they involve actions not taken by the named official, but by others. This mirrors the case at hand. The Michigan Campaign Finance Act placed the duty of handling complaints with the Secretary of State, but this duty may be performed by an agent, so the Secretary assigned it to the Bureau of Elections. Therefore, the reason for recall on the petition of allegedly delaying investigating and resolving such complaints was not taken by Secretary Benson, so is not factual. This petition is also not clear. The Court of Appeals has held that sufficient clarity, quote, to enable the officer and electors to identify the transaction and know the charges made in connection therewith, end quote, is required of the reason for recall. So this board has rejected petitions that lack specificity and paraphrase. This is precisely what the petition here does. The reason for recall tells Secretary Benson and electors nothing of the referenced complaints made under the Campaign Finance Act that Secretary Benson has allegedly delayed investigating and resolving. Rather than pointing to those specific complaints, the recall petition merely references complaints generally. This reason for recall falls woefully short of identifying the transaction required for the clarity standard. For all of these reasons, the board should reject this petition. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you very much. Questions? Comments?
Yeah, I have a question about your argument. That it is not Secretary Benson's responsibility, that it is that of an agent who she has designated. Doesn't she still have the overall responsibility to ensure that the agent is carrying out the duties which she is charged with?
I do think that she still has the overall duty, but the statutory provision is very clear that it's the officer's conduct that must, be the reason for the recall petition. And in this situation, Secretary Benson is not the official for these purposes.
So you're not saying that Secretary Benson is not responsible overall, but that the petition itself refers to her as opposed to the people she has designated to carry out that responsibility?
I believe so, and I'm sorry if that was a little bit confusing. Just the statutory provision is very clear that it talks about the officer's conduct. And just in this instant, Secretary Benson does not review and investigate and resolve those complaints. She lets an agent do it. So that's our argument. Again, there are several bases that this recall petition should be rejected, though, if the board does not find that one sufficient.
Cummings?
I just have a quick question about the argument about handwritten.
Mhm.
The way
You're-
I had,
you're-
oh,
You have to press your button. There.
sorry. I'll repeat that. I had a question about the argument that the petition was handwritten, and that's one of the reasons to reject the petition. And the way I read the law is that it may be typed, but it doesn't have to be. I just wondered if you could respond to that.
Sure. So the statute in subsection B says that the petition must be printed, and the only exception is that the reason for recall may be typewritten. So everything must be printed, but then that reason for recall may be typewritten. There's no exception for handwriting.
Okay.
I have a follow-up maybe for our attorneys or Jonathan. What is your interpretation of the word printed? I mean, do we have a history of looking at handwritten and considering that printed?
So we are still looking to see, we are not aware of any prior case where this board has rejected a recall petition on the basis that the form was filled out partially in handwriting. The form itself is printed in the form in the form promulgated by the secretary and by the bureau. So it's the idea of whether or not the filling out of the individual spaces in handwriting makes it not printed. We're aware of no prior case where the board has rejected the petition on that basis. We think there is a case on this. It feels very familiar to us, but we have not yet found the citation for it.
I could add that the argument is familiar.
Um,
And it's one that Mr. Brewer has made in the past that we rejected.
We still wanted to raise it before this
Yes.
board today, but as I said, there are other reasons that this petition should be rejected as well.
No, an item for you. So as regards the secretary being responsible for what happens with the departments underneath her control, I absolutely disagree with your assertion. Okay, just have to tell you that. If the buck has to stop somewhere. I have employees in my company. If I try to defend a bad action in any situation by saying, well, it's not me, it was the employee that did it. That doesn't fly anywhere. So I just want to share that with you.
Okay.
On the other hand, I would also suggest that you are correct in that there's no specificity. This is a very wide, general shot at the wall. So
Mhm.
just wanted to make sure we noted that.
I agree with you, Chair Housecamp, that it is not clear and factual, or you said specific, but I think that you're referring to the same thing. The language far longer is itself unclear. And in addition, the statute says that each reason has to be clear and factual. And here it refers both to investigation and resolution. So those are two separate proceedings which have to be undertaken. And I think that this is certainly unclear.
And we've rejected in the past. We've rejected in the past when something was not specified. We've had people come back to us, right?
Right.
So, is there any other discussion or questions that we have? I don't think there is. Well, before we do that, could I just ask one question? Because I'm not sure who's in the audience. Is there anyone here from the other side? Mr. Faust here or anyone representing him? That's a no. So you have a motion.
Before the motion, if I could just interject. So a couple notes, because there are two recall petitions submitted by the same individual, I would suggest that the motion just indicate that it's the first one considered or something to indicate it. And then when it sounds like the board is going to find it is not factual and sufficiently clear, when that occurs, the motion includes a reason that it's not factual or clear. So just noting that before the motion is entered.
So I have a motion regarding the petition. Can I see the? That the petition, I move that the Board of State Canvassers determine that the reasons for recall on the petition submitted by Paul Faust against Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson on February 27th, 2025, which alleges that that Secretary Benson is taking far longer than the statute allows to investigate and resolve complaints under the Michigan Campaign Finance Act, is not factual and sufficiently clear because the term far longer is not clear, and because the petition relates both to investigation and resolution of the complaints, and it is not clear which of those is asserted to be, because both of those, I'm trying to frame this correctly, because both investigation and resolution are unclear.
Is there a second?
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Item number 4, the consideration of the sufficiency of the recall petition submitted by Paul Faust against Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. And this one is for
Government resources for personal benefit. Again, Rowan Connie Bear on behalf of Secretary Benson. And again, as indicated in our written response filed on Monday, the board should reject this so-called recall petition. The defective form arguments that I raised earlier also apply here, but I will not repeat them for the sake of time. So here the reason for recall is not based on conduct in office. MCL 168.951A requires that each reason for recall be based upon the officer's conduct during his or her current term in office. Assuming that the recall petition is referring to Ms. Benson's January 22nd press conference announcing her gubernatorial candidacy, Secretary Benson was not acting as an officer at that time. As the content of the press conference reveals, she was there in her personal capacity as a candidate for governor and not as Secretary of State. So MCL 168.95A did not apply to her when conducting the press conference. This petition is also not factual. Secretary Benson did not use government-owned resources that are not publicly accessible. The press conference was held in the Richard Austin Building, which has a large first-floor public lobby and common area used by public visitors. Many candidates and ballot question committees have conducted press conferences in this lobby. It's a natural place to do so, right outside the Bureau's offices where filing occurs. Therefore, the lobby is and has been available to other candidates and committees to use to give press conferences. And this petition does not meet the clarity standard either. It is not sufficiently clear that the petition is even referring to Secretary Benson's January 22nd press conference regarding her run for governor. Again, the Court of Appeals has required identifiable acts for a recall petition to meet the clarity standard. As such, this board has determined that reasons for recall are not sufficiently clear if they lack dates. And that is exactly what the petition here fails to do and more. The reason for recall does not notify Secretary Benson and electors of when the alleged announcement occurred, and nothing of the referenced government-owned resources that she allegedly used, the announcement she made, nor what her 2026 electoral intentions were. No details are provided to pinpoint what the petition is referring to. It could be any number of announcements that Secretary Benson has made in her nearly 2 terms as Secretary of State. So the reason for recall clearly fails to identify the transaction as is required by the clarity standard. For all of these reasons, the board should reject this petition. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any further questions that the board may have.
I was doing a little bit of research into this. There is still at least 1, maybe 2 open investigations into that press conference, including one by the Attorney General's office as to whether that was legal, correct?
There are several campaign finance complaints, yes, and we have alleged that they have no merit because of the reasons I announced today.
But they're still open.
Yes, they're still being investigated.
But we don't even know if that's not listed on the recall petition.
Correct.
So we don't even know.
Correct.
I mean, I assume that when I read it as well, that it was,
But we don't know.
right. It's again, not factual or it's not clear.
Correct.
When I read it, I didn't know where this press conference was or whether it was publicly accessible. And I only know that because of what you said, but
Yeah.
it's not clear from the petition.
Right, of course. And
So-
that's exactly the
Yeah.
point. Yes.
Yes.
In absence of anyone from the other side, do we have a motion?
I'd just like to say ahead of the vote, because I know that obviously it has to hit every single issue. I do think that this lacks clarity. Obviously, the disclaimer on these, and just to confirm, these petitions do need to have a paid for by disclaimer generally, or no?
The Michigan Campaign Finance Act requires them to have a disclaimer. To the extent to which the board, that impacts the board's deliberation on this issue is a question I would defer to the Attorney General's office, but the Campaign Finance Act does require that.
Taking the relay from the director, that's correct. The board's review here is limited to the statute under 168.951A, which doesn't specifically give this board the authority to review for whether there is a violation of the Campaign Finance Act. They might have other problems under the Campaign Finance Act, but I don't think that'd be a basis for this board to reject it.
Okay, thank you. I would say that from clarity's sake, I agree that this lacks some clarity, but I think that many people can make the connection to what we're talking about. But I think that while there's still an open investigation by the Attorney General's office, that it would be premature and inappropriate for us to make decisions on the facts of this while there's still potential criminal liability. So for that reason, I will be voting to reject these petitions.
I'd like to do that.
That,
A motion would,
yeah, I just would like to add that the issue about the campaign finance disclaimer
Yeah.
is one that we've addressed in the past. And I think we spent quite a bit of time trying to understand whether the absence of the disclaimer would give the Board of Canvassers either the obligation or the right to reject the petition, and concluded, I think, as Mr. Grill said, that that's somebody else's job.
Very good.
I move that the Board of State Canvassers determine that the reasons for recall printed on the petition submitted by Paul Faust against Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson on February 27th, 2025 are not factual and sufficiently clear because they lack a date of when the incident occurred. The term government-owned resources is not clear. It should give a specific building if that's indeed what Mr. Faust is discussing. It's also not clear that it's not publicly accessible. We don't know if that's factual or not.
Support.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right,
Thank you so much.
thank you for presenting.
Thank
Thank
you.
We can move on to item number 5, consideration of the certification of the Election Systems and Software, Inc., EVS 6.5.0.0 voting systems. Mr. Brader, will you give us some insight?
Yes, Chair Housecamp, happy to. So this is a modification to the ES&S voting system for the board to consider. It's the same kind of thing that the board considered with regard to Dominion in our last meeting. So this is a version upgrade. It's not a completely new system like we would get, every 10 years or so. It's still certified under the existing voluntary voting system guidelines 1. Although, as I noted, I won't rehash all this, but we are coming up on the 10-year contract for voting systems. So we will be seeing larger scale changes to bring before the board in the next couple of years. But this is a version upgrade to the currently approved election systems and software, or ES&S version. ES&S is used in 7 counties in Michigan, including Macomb County, the largest county that uses it, also Kalamazoo County and several other counties. This version includes upgrade includes a couple of enhancements. It upgrades the operating system that's used for the high-speed scanners. Those, again, are the ones that are used in absent voter ballot counting boards. There's both a DS 450 and a DS, which is very fast, and a DS 950, which is very, very fast. Those have both been upgraded to increase the processing power. Another advance is the operating system on the election management system computer that the county uses to program the election. That's been upgraded to Microsoft Windows 10 Enterprise LTSC 2021, and it also updates the operating system to the Microsoft Windows Server 2022. It also requires BitLocker encryption on all of the hardware, which is a security enhancement. This version also features the DS 300 tabulator, which is a faster version of the tabulator that's used in precincts. So it improves the voting experience for voters who are going into precincts, also allows those ballots to be tabulated a bit more quickly, which can help with lines, and also makes them more effective in those areas where the tabulator is used for absentee ballots, which is the case in a lot of smaller jurisdictions. So this was reviewed by a voting system test laboratory that is accredited by the National Institute of Standards and Technology and approved by the Election Assistance Commission. The test laboratory that approved this one is ProV&V, and this has also been certified by the Election Assistance Commission. We also conducted our own testing on it. Again, that is not as extensive as what the test laboratory does, but we do run the equipment through a number of tests, including making sure all the components work as expected and running test ballots through the tabulators and the high-speed scanners. The equipment operated as expected. We also were assisted in this by the Macomb County Clerk's Office. The Macomb County Clerk Election Director attended the testing and assisted us, so we're very appreciative of that. And so based on the review that this is undergone by the test laboratory, the Election Assistance Commission, and our own testing, we're recommending that the board certify this upgrade to the ES&S system.
Thank you, Mr. Brader. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I was just wondering how often do the upgrades occur?
An upgrade of this nature usually is like once per election cycle. You know, one of the things that is challenging is that the timeline for upgrading technology doesn't always neatly line up with the election cycle. We would love that to be the case. You know, we would love all of the voting system vendors and all the testing to schedule their updates so that they happen like every 2 years. But typically, you know, because of the time it takes to go through the approval process, to test it, to certify it, and then the lengthiest process is the actual installation of the new equipment and all of the jurisdictions. We try to do that whenever possible early in the odd year so that it doesn't, so first of all, it doesn't interfere with even year elections, and also so that we have a couple of lower turnout, lower intensity elections for the jurisdictions to get used to the equipment changes before we have a major election. Sometimes we have to do them a little later in the cycle, but whenever possible, we try to do it at this time of year. So a version upgrade like this is typically every 2 years and ideally in the early part of the odd year possible.
Okay. And can you repeat what you said? A number of states use the same system?
So yeah, ES&S is a large voting system vendor. It's used, I think, in probably at least by some jurisdictions in the majority of states, although I'm not 100% sure how many states it's used in. Within Michigan, it is used in 7 of our counties, and that includes Macomb County, which is our 3rd largest county. So it's, you know, it's our of the 3, the fewest number of counties use it, but it's still used pretty widely in Michigan.
Thank you.
Quick question. I know you said that this goes through, you know, when we do all these testings, it goes through multiple test phases before it even arrives here. This is our, you know, my 2nd meeting, and we've had now 2 of these to evaluate. Have there ever been an instance where you guys have found issues as you've gone through the testing?
Yes, I mean, sometimes we will find issues where, you know, there might be a problem like with the display on the voter assist terminal that we want them to correct with the software update. And so those tend to be things that, you know, if they're small things, we'll tend to still recommend certifying it and just with the understanding that they're going to correct that in the future. If we find, you know, if we were to find a major issue, we wouldn't bring it to the board for certification. I cannot remember offhand a time, at least in the last couple of years, where we found an issue like that. But I don't know. I'm looking. No, staff says no, that has not happened recently. But if that were to occur, we would not bring it to the board until that had been resolved.
Thank you.
Director Brader, just a offhand question from reviewing your document. You mentioned underneath the system description a Ubico login for Windows. Behind that, it refers to a dual factor authorization or authentication and shows it as being optional. Here's my question. It's not related. It's related to the login on these machines when they're actually in use in the field. Are you requiring a multi-factor login on these?
So this is, we're talking about the,
Talking about
we're
logging
talking
into
about the Windows system. So this would be, I think, and I will ask staff to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is relating to the actual desktop computer that the the county uses to program. I don't know if we've made a determination as to whether the dual factor authentication would be required for use by the counties. Is this an, because staff told me, is this, do you know if this dual factor is a new enhancement or is this in the previous version? Okay, so staff is saying that this was in the previous version as well. Yeah, so, right. So I don't actually know whether we require counties to use the dual factor. I think we would certainly recommend it.
Okay. That might, yeah.
But I can certainly get more information.
I would love
on
to
you.
know the answer to that.
Yeah.
It seems like we're at a point now in technology where dual factor is a pretty accepted practice procedure. I see him back there, yeah.
Director Brader is getting us assistance.
Yeah,
from-
so that was a little
from-
too technical for me to
Yeah.
handle. But I mean, in any case, the voting system does allow for dual factor. So in terms of whether we would require that, it's certainly something that's allowed for in the software. I can get more information on that and follow up with you as to whether we require or only recommend that the counties use that dual factor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding or comments related to this upgrade? In the absence of that, I would entertain a motion to,
I move that the board certify the Election Systems and Software, Inc. EVS 6.5.0.0 voting system for use in the state of Michigan.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 6, this is a discussion of the investigation into the qualifying petitions submitted by Cornell West.
So following the board's last meeting, we did send the subpoena to the campaign. I think although the deadline for the response had not yet hit, we did get a response last night. Which I think it was objecting to some aspects of the subpoena, in some respects, but it did provide some information, some additional information. We haven't had a chance to review that, but just based on a quick read, it does seem to have some additional information that we might be able to use to look at signatures. So we will, we'll review the response, with the Attorney General for any like legal issues. Obviously defer to the AG's office if they want to share anything on that right now, but I imagine they haven't had a ton of time to look at it. But so those questions we can bring back to you to the extent that there's any determinations the board needs to make with respect to the legal issues raised by the campaign. But with respect to the additional information that was provided, the Bureau staff will review that and come back to the board with more information on the signature matching that we're able to perform.
We should have maybe some information next board meeting.
Yes.
All right, questions?
I looked at the subpoena and I think it gave them 14 days to respond. Is that correct?
I believe that's
Yeah,
correct.
and the response date you said has not yet arrived, although there was.
Yeah, as I understand it, it wasn't quite due yesterday, but last night we got a response. So I don't know if that was sent because of the board meeting today or what the reason was, but we did get at least a partial response.
Okay. You good? Are there other business matters to be brought or presented to the board? Nothing. In the absence of anything new, I would entertain a motion to conclude the board meeting. Moved. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.